This video is sponsored by Vivo. So this is the Vivo X50 Pro, and if you're familiar with Vivo, you know that as they lead, the industry tends to follow with a lot of cool technology, and the X50 Pro is the latest flagship device that's trying to blaze a new path forward for the company. Depending on where you live in the world, chances are if you follow tech, you've heard of Vivo. They tend to be the first ones to pioneer new technologies, tend to get adopted by other manufacturers several months later. So you look at how ubiquitous in-screen fingerprint readers are now. At CES 2018, Vivo was the first manufacturer to actually show that working in a phone. The pop-up selfie camera we've seen on a bunch of phones, that came to Vivo first with the Vivo Nex. And what will probably be the future in a few years, the portless phone, Vivo showed off a working concept, the Vivo Apex, in 2019. So as a fan of technology, I'm always pretty stoked to check out what's coming next from Vivo, because always kind of one thing in there that's gonna eventually make its way to other phones, and the X50 Pro is no exception. So the X50 Pro's trick, the killer feature, is on the camera department. So we've seen smartphone cameras get really good when it comes to video stabilization and then holding your hand still for night mode. It's been kind of deficient there. The X50 Pro has gimbal technology built in that brings stabilization crazy next level. Before I get there though, let me tell you what's gonna come in the box. All right, so inside the box, you've got your X50 Pro. You've got a beastly 33-watt charger, which I love to see, USB Type-C cable, wired earbuds with USB Type-C on the other end, some removal tool, some paperwork, and a clear case all in the box. So if wired headphones aren't your jam, Vivo also announced a new pair of wireless earbuds. They're the TWS Earphone Neo. So they'll charge with Type-C. It'll give you about 22 hours of battery life with the case. They've got in-ear detection as well, so they'll know when they're in. If you pull one out, it can pause for you. So super low latency, available in Starry Blue or Moonlight White, which is code for, blue and white. All right, so all that's fine, but kind of the star of the show, this guy, the X50 Pro, and there's a lot to like about it. So on the display front, it's a Samsung made panel, which is awesome, and it's called the 3D Curved Ultra O. Essentially what you're gonna get is a full HD plus AMOLED panel at 90 Hertz that kind of does have a waterfall effect, and I've talked a lot about kind of these curved screens on the side. Aesthetically, they are beautiful. Functionally though, I tend to get kind of accidental taps on the side. I have not had those problems yet in my about 5 to 7 days with the Vivo X50 Pro, but bear it in mind. It does have an under-display fingerprint reader. It's got about a 4,300 milliamp hour battery. And it's being powered by the Snapdragon 765G. So first of all, it's a 5G phone, but also you take that processor that uses less power with a, essentially a full HD plus panel. You've got a recipe for really good battery life, and that's what you're going to get here. Since this is gonna be sold all over the world, I'm not even gonna try to touch price. I'll link down below though to where you can learn about the X50 Pro and you can figure out what the price is going to be where you live. So all that's cool and fine, and quite frankly, we've seen it in other phones. There's nothing that crazy there. But what is unique and awesome, what I'm kind of pumped about, is on the back, the camera. So it's got a great camera array, first of all, crazy high 32 megapixel selfie camera. On the back, there are just sensors galore. It's a 48 megapixel primary sensor, 8 megapixel super wide, This was a new one. I haven't seen something called this before. A 13 megapixel bokeh sensor, 8 megapixel telescopic, which is gonna work for 60 times hybrid zoom. Here are some camera samples for yourself. You can be the judge of the quality. To my eye, they looked really good. And I came away like super impressed with the quality of the portrait shots. There's great dynamic range here, really good color reproduction. To some people's eye, the pictures may look a little over-processed, but that's going to be a personal preference thing. But the big deal is stabilization. And I think Android for many years has been really deficient to the competition when it came to video. And I think manufacturers are making a really concerted effort to bridge that gap to as small as possible. And X50 Pro is a giant step in getting us there. So the phone has OIS, optical stabilization, we've seen that before. It's got EIS, electronic stabilization, we've seen that before. But you take those two, combine it with some new secret sauce they're just calling gimbal technology, you've got a recipe for like stupid still video that really does look like you have it on a gimbal. And here are some samples of that working, and we didn't do anything crazy to try to game this and make it look stable. This is just normal walking around, moving your arm as you would shots, and the stability here is awesome. And you can see it, here's what it looks like with it on, and here it is with that technology off. There's a giant difference. So perhaps the one downside, you are limited with the resolution and frame rate when you're using sort of this gimbal technology. You're at 1080p and between 25 and 30 frames per second. So when you are shooting at 4K, and again, you can shoot up to 60 frames per second if you want, just look at the benefit of OIS and EIS. So I like having choice. That's why I like phones that have as many camera sensors as possible. So when I want that crazy stable video, I think it's a fair trade-off to go down to 1080. And when I want to shoot sort of the higher frame rate, higher resolution, I have the option of doing that here. And when I have the gimbal technology turned off, it's still pretty stable. I mean, it looks very good. It's just not as good as it would be if you had that gimbal tech kicked on. So obviously video is like the huge beneficiary of like the gimbal tech. But was really a nice side effect was actually night mode. So if you're not familiar with night mode, you usually have to hold your phone still for a couple seconds to get that night mode to actually work. You can do that with the gimbal tech on, which means you get a much clearer night mode picture because the stabilization is kind of being taken care of. You can see, at least to my eye, how good these night mode shots actually look. So when you look at the X50 Pro, it brings a lot of awesome things to the table. Now there are things that you could nitpick and say, I wish would be changed. You've got higher resolution and maybe processor, but the killer feature, that gimbal level technology, works as advertised. And that's sort of a new level of tech that we haven't seen before. And I give Vivo a ton of credit for delivering that in a really small, regular phone size package. And I'd wager a bet that this sort of technology we will see filter down to other manufacturers, probably sometime later on this year or even into next year. So when you see it, remember Vivo did it first.